Today on the bench, we've got my big target rifle, 300 Win Mag. Anzio Annie is her nickname. And we're going to be doing a bipod extension. So a bipod extension moves the bipod closer to the end of the barrel. And I'm doing this because I saw a gentleman at the range the other day with a very neat setup. And I spoke to him for a few minutes. And the way he explains it is that when you're shooting at 300 yards or greater, okay, so I do have the opportunity to shoot at 500 all the way out to 900 yards at a particular spot. Anyway, when I'm shooting out that far, so the bipod is about the center of gravity of the barrel right now. So every little movement up and down exaggerates the longer the range gets. The farther you shoot, just a little movement can mean a quarter inch at 100 yards, but it might mean an inch at 300 yards, or it might mean 6 inches at 500 yards. So that movement means a lot. And some of the friendly matches that I take part in, I don't do anything professionally, but some of the friendly shooting matches I take part in, they don't let us use a bag. We don't have any type of shoulder rest that we can use. Just we shoot prone and we shoot with the stock. We can use any kind of front rest, similar to F-class. I believe this actually would be an F-class rifle. It's 17 pounds. I would have to take the muzzle brake off. I don't think you can use a muzzle brake in F-class or F-open. But anyway, so the rifle's 17 pounds as it sits right now. So by moving the bipod closer to the end of the barrel, those movements, those up and down movements, are reduced. So that what might be a quarter inch movement back here, instead of being a quarter inch at the barrel, might be 1/8 of an inch or less. And that just makes the whole system more accurate. So I've seen these online going for anywhere from $200 for some real cheapo ones to one company's got well over $1,000 for the carbon fiber extendables. And we don't need all that. This is the only rifle I'm going to be doing this on. And we're going to be making this out of some tube and some scope rings, and let me show you what we got. Alright, so our materials list for this is going to be a piece of pipe. And I just happen to have this piece of galvanized conduit laying around. It's steel, galvanized, obviously. We're going to cut that down. It's got a hair over 1 inch diameter, so we might have to either polish it down a little bit. So we're looking at a 1.69, 1.707, maybe a little thicker. Yeah, 1.6069. So we're very close to 1 inch. So with that being said, I also have a set of Picatinny rails. I got a bunch of different sizes in a kit. And I've got these UTG quick release scope rings off another project. So they just get thrown in a junk drawer. So now I can repurpose those. And those are for a 1 inch tube. So I believe a 1 inch tube, if it's exactly 1 inch, this is a little bit bigger than an inch. We might have to just take it down a little bit, or we open the rings up, either way. But what I plan on doing is, I drew a really crude design. So I'm going to mount the scope rings on the rail and put the rail where the bipod is right now. Now that bipod it's a tension mount. There's a hole and a little fulcrum and a forcing screw, and that's what keeps that up there. So that's how that's mounted. So what we're going to do is we're going to mount the Picatinny rail to the bottom of the gun, and we're going to bolt that on. Then the rings are going to go on the bottom of the gun, and then we've got the tube that's going to extend out, and then the bipod's going to mount on the end of the tube. So we have to cut this tube down. I figure I'm going to need exactly 2 feet, 24 inches. So let's cut this tube down to 24 inches. And it's galvanized, so you can use a grinder on it as long as you have, you know, all your PPE in place. Do not use a cutting torch or any type of, you know, equipment like that on galvanized. It's going to release gas that you really don't want to be breathing in. But you can saw it. You can cut it on a chop saw. So let's get this cut down and go from there. Okay, so we've got the tube cut down to 24 inches, and I just did a little end work. Just file the end so that it's not sharp or anything. So let's check the fit of our rings. That. So, let's see if we can see that in the camera. So the ring doesn't sit perfectly flat. So it looks like we actually have quite a bit of room, quite a bit of material that we might have to get rid of. Yeah. Yeah, that might do some damage to the rings. So we've got one or two options. Either I can polish this down a little bit, which I'm going to need a press or a lathe, and I could probably open these rings up a little bit too by taking the edges off. That might make them sit a little flatter. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not like we're fitting a scope. This is just yeah. Let me get a little bit of Scotch-Brite. I mean, if the screws are long enough, like I said, we're not mounting a scope. It doesn't have to have even pressure all the way around, even though that would be nice. Let's tighten this down, see what happens. What's the worst that could happen? The rings break? They were off another project anyway. They're probably $30 on Amazon. And they're aluminum. Okay, so when I tighten this down, just even at a moderate pressure, except for this bottom section, which probably is because it's stiff, the top pretty much flattened out, and that doesn't move. I'm not going to do anything more than that. I mean, to me, that's a win. That's not a scope. That's just mounting bracket. So, let's clean this up a little bit more. This is the family channel. Okay, so an easy way to get these to line up is to just, put the Picatinny rail on there. Yeah, because I'm gonna have to take this back apart again, because I have to take the Picatinny rail off, the mount Picatinny rail. But anyway, if I could hold on to the. There we go. No further machine work necessary. Look at that. Damn, that's a tight fit. Look at that. And that's it. And that is going to go underneath the chassis. Just like that. All right. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, I had to do some minor disassembly to the chassis to get the heat guard off, the foregrip off. So what we're going to do is, I took the sling mount off. That's how this particular bipod attaches, with a sling mount. And what we're going to do is, this is the bottom, and this is where the rail is going to sit. So I'm going to use the pre-existing hole for the front, and I'm going to have to drill one hole here in the back. Now, my biggest problem, which is not too bad of a problem, is these rails that I have they have these sections on it. They're meant for an M-lock style mount. So since these are the ones that I have that I'm using, I'm just going to flatten this out. I'm just going to grind these off, grind this flat, and then these are aluminum, so I don't have to worry about anything rusting or anything like that. But I'm just going to put a little coat of black paint on it when I'm done. So let's move these out, and you can use anything. You can use a grinder, you can sand them if you want to, but I mean, it's aluminum, it'll come off pretty quick. And then we're going to drill a hole to the bottom of that, and we'll bolt these on. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at finished. I don't have a planer or anything like that. I just used a bench grinder, ground down all the edges, and then I just flat sanded it with some 220 and a wooden block. That's all you do. Okay, so we're going to lay this over. Let me wipe this out. I still have a little bit of aluminum residue on it. There we go. That's it. Alright. So let's mark this and drill it. So what we'll do is, let's install and all kinds of good stuff in here. Okay. That looks good. So again, these are for M-locks, so they're not gonna fit the best, but you know what? We're gonna have to open that hole up. So okay, so let's open this hole up before we go drilling in there. Or maybe not. There we go. Alright, so we don't need to open that hole up. It doesn't have to be super tight. So let's get this lined up somewhat. Get that snug. Okay, so that's the way that rail is going to mount. And let's see what we have here. So we're looking at a 0.357. All right, so move this out of the way. Put some down here. Okay, so we've got this bad boy centered, and you have to make sure that it's centered, especially when I'm using a rail this long. Make sure that that's centered, because if the rail's not centered, the pipe's going to go out and the pipe's going to be crooked. So we're going to be using a, what is this, a 3/16? This is a 3/16. Yeah, this is a 3/16. And this should drill easy. It's just aluminum. Super easy. Yours might be different. Don't even have to push hard. That's it. Okay. Didn't make too much of a mess. All right. Have to get my pinky in there to get the little nut located. Oops. No, that's nowhere near where that nut is. Alright, let's get the nut lined up first. Now this is all coming back apart again for finish work, and you could finish it however you want. I'm going to be finishing everything in black. Just going to be recoating everything in black. There we go. And I actually I might have some Aluma Black somewhere. Just throw that on there. All right. So that is the Picatinny rail installed. Looks straight. Okay. And of course we're going to straighten those out in there. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but those nuts aren't exactly straight because, again, this is an M-LOK kit. These are not M-LOK. This is not an M-LOK Ford Rip. All right, so let's put the rifle back together and mount the tube. So I almost forgot, before we go mounting that back on the rifle, so we have to mount our bipod to the tube. So the nice thing about this is when the bipod is mounted to the tube, you can rotate this. We're going to level it out inside the rings. So you can rotate that, and then we'll tighten everything down. So let's get this drilled. So a real quick, we're going to mark this with our approximate location. We're just going to drill a little hole, and then we're going to put our mount. And your bipod might be different, okay? So always want to make sure that the legs fold forward, because when you're using a bipod, you kind of push on the bipod. So let's get this mocked up a little bit, and let's move these out of the way, and let's say we're going to put the hole right there. Okay, that leaves us a little room. We're going to drill the hole, and that should be super easy to mount up that bipod. And again, just drill a hole. Now this is steel, so we might have to push a little bit, but you want to get your hole started. Alright, so we got our hole started at a slow speed, and we're going to use a little looby-looby. What are we using here? We're using 3/16, and then I got a little bit of this stuff, Tap Magic. So we're just going to put just a drop or two right there, and then let's drill. Not too fast. Do a little bit more. Just a drop or two does it. And you can do this in a drill press. You can do this anywhere you want. What I do is, as soon as I start seeing little wisps of smoke or anything like that, I'll put another drop on there. There you go. Okay. And we'll get that cleaned up, and we'll put the bipod on. Alright, so we've got that. Let's put our stud back in there. Let's see if we can do this. Whoops. Yeah, we're gonna have to sneak that bad boy in there. Have to do that again. Gotta hold it with the pinky. Can we get in there with the pinky? We certainly can. Alright. Got it lined up. The washer on there. And there's tons of different mounts for bipods too. So you don't have to mount your bipod the way I am. This is just the way this bipod mounts. I mean, I'm doing this on a budget. The budget is basically zero. You know, this is all stuff that I've had laying around, and it seems that this may not be thick enough. Alright, I'm going to have to get rid of the washer. Not enough threads to grab. Okay, let's try this again. All right. And there's tons of tricks you can do to do this. I mean, I've been a mechanic since I was 5 years old, so the little pinky trick is something I learned a long time ago. Make sure that's tight, and want to move that so that it's perpendicular with a little bit more with the pipe. Okay. Does that look perpendicular? Yeah, that's perpendicular. Okay. Let's see how the bipod mounts to it. So, I mean, if you have a bipod that runs on a Picatinny rail, that just means you're going to have to drill 2 holes and mount another Picatinny rail to this one. But again, I don't have to do that. Put that in there like this. Put that in there like that. I hit it with a wiffle ball bat. All right. And then that pushes on those 2. Tighten this up. All right. And there is our bipod mounted to the pipe. Now all that's left now, we can put the gun back together and mount our rings. Okay, I just had to switch the camera up there for a minute because I'm doing some stuff here on the table. So I've got the chassis back together. I had to take the muzzle brake off because I couldn't fit the foregrip over, and of course everything, you can see I got my fat wrench out here. I was torquing everything, so so I can put that away for a minute. Let me just clean this table up a minute. Let me put it away, and you can never forget, you got to always put your fat wrench. Most torque wrenches, you have to bring all the way back to 0 when you store them. Otherwise, you'll ruin the springs inside. Most, not all. Definitely, if you have a Wheeler fat wrench, you definitely have to bring it back to 0. Okay. All right, so let's put the tube in there. Let me zoom out a little bit. Good. All right, let me put the tube in there, and then we'll get everything leveled out. And let's clean this up a little bit. Because I told you I was going to clean it up, but I didn't really. That's all for right now. Knock some of the dirt out of it. Okay. All right, let's put this in. Right in there. Okay. And then what we're going to do, that's heavy. Whoosh. Close the bolt. Wow, that is so long now. All right. Anyway, you can see what it looks like. So that looks pretty cool. Let me get it on the bench so we can level it out. Because it's either that or we do it on the floor. Okay, so on the bench we are. So let's get the scope cover off. Put that down here. Now, I have a bubble level already on the scope. So I don't need to use any other bubble levels. You can do whatever you need to do. Most scopes level off the top knob. So all we're going to do is I'm going to turn this until that bubble is level. And then I'm going to tighten those up. If I got the right size. That's a 3 mil. Is it a 3 mil? It's 3 mil. Okay. And I'm not really going to go hard on these because, again, I'm going to take this apart, and I think I am going to do that in black. I'm going to smooth it all out and just paint it black. I see a red door and I want to paint it black. Giving away my age. Anyway, that's it. That is exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to move the camera around. Take the camera out of the mount. That's what we're going for. We moved the bipod all the way up past the front of the rifle. We've got good. Oh, that is heavy. Woo! Okay. But still, that's where you want the rifle back here, so that now any of those little up and down movements don't translate down the end of the line. Oh, I can't wait to shoot this. Okay, so let me do some finishing work on it. Like I said, I'm just going to shoot that tube in black, and then I'm going to do a little touch up on the Picatinny rail. I'm pretty sure I have some aluminum black around here somewhere, like I said before. And that's it. We'll show you what the finished looks like. And then we're going to weigh it. Okay, so before I do any of the finishing work, I'm dying to know what this thing weighs. So, before it was 17 pounds. And this is my archery / fish scale. So, let's see what she weighs. She now weighs 20 pounds on the nose. That is a lot of rifle. Wow. Okay. So, 20 pounds. She feels a lot heavier, but okay. You know, and you could do curls with it. Anyway. Okay. I was just curious. All right. So we've got this all set. Just sprayed it with some black paint, and we're ready for reassembly. Alright, so let's get the bipod put on. So this mounts right on that little stud. It's just a sling swivel. So we'll get that mounted up. And nope, that was on backwards. See, you always got to double check. That bipod has to fold forward. Otherwise, when you put weight on it, it'll fold up on you. Okay. There we go. Alright, that's fold forward. And let's tighten this up. That's it. Okay, so there's the bipod. Now, let's get the gun over here, and let me put it in a mount. So, let's try again. We're not going to tighten this up until we level it out. But I just want to get it so that it's about even with the front of the rifle. And then once it's leveled, we can tighten it up. That's it. It's on. Alright, let's go back to the bench. And get it leveled out. Okay, so we got this back on the bench. And let's level this out. Okay, we have our bubble level on the scope. Real super easy. Make sure that the legs on the bipod are fully retracted, and we're just gonna turn that until we get a level bubble. We want it to sit neutral, perfectly bubble level, and now we're going to tighten this up. And that's it, folks. That's all she wrote. So, bipod is extended out to the end of the rifle. She's real heavy on here, but obviously we'll use a sandbag. And if we can't use a sandbag, we've got to make the best of it. There's other positions. And the nice thing is when I want to fold this down into the case, the quick release latches on the side. One. Make sure I don't drop it. Two. And that's that. That comes off, and now she can go into the rifle case. And we have this separately. And then that just clicks on with the quick release, and that's it. And it's as easy as going right back on. You put it right back on. Just like that. Make sure that she's level in the rails. Clamp. Clip. That's it. Can't get any easier than that. And now she'll fit in the case with no problem. And I gotta look to see if I can make room in the case for the bipod. If not, I'll just have to carry the bipod separately. That's all. But that's what we're looking at. And she moved that fulcrum all the way to the front, as if we had a bag on the end of the barrel.